hosted by the Campus Facilities Technology Association and organized by the University of Kentucky. I'm Lauren Weaver, and thank you all in the webinar and at OSU today with Larissa for joining us. Today's webinar is being recorded. Both the recording and slides will be made available on the CFTA website following this presentation. The presentation is estimated to run about 45 minutes with the remaining time open for Q&A. Feel free to send any questions during the presentation using the questions dialog box or by raising your hand. Your question will be added to the queue and answered at the end of the presentation as time allows. I'd like to extend a big thank you to today's presenter, Larissa Kruger, Enterprise GIS Manager at Ohio State University. She joins us today to discuss the integration of BIM and GIS to harness features of each to meet demands from asset management to web mapping. Larissa, thank you for joining us today. The webinar is yours.
Thanks so much, Lauren, and thank you, CFTA and University of Kentucky, for putting this together and allowing me to share some of your time today to share what we're doing here at OSU. So let me start by just giving you a little bit of background about the Enterprise GIS Initiative here at Ohio State. I've actually been at Ohio State for only 2 years. This GIS initiative is fairly new to the university. There have been some disparate groups across the university that have been doing GIS, but nothing has been brought together to kind of create an enterprise environment or one centralized location to have all of the GIS data for the university. So I'm part of the Facilities Information and Technology Services group. It's also under PAIR, which is our Physical Planning and Real Estate. It's composed, at least the fifth side, is composed of 2 full-time employees, myself, and another GIS assistant that does predominantly mapping for most planning purposes, but also other ad hoc uses across the university. We also have 4 students part-time that do a lot of our churn, so building the base map, that sort of thing. There are also 5 full-time employees that work on our BIM and Revit models and our space data. They also using 6 students to promote their BIM initiative and get that off the ground, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Our university campus is composed of 1,350 buildings. That includes the regionals. Obviously, our main campus doesn't have near that number, and we're also responsible for managing over 34 million gross square feet. That includes 1,660 acres on our Columbus campus and over 15,000 acres, including regionals. So the University Initiative, Enterprise GIS Initiative, is mainly brought about to kind of promote, integrate, and standardize the use of GIS across the university. Like I said, there are a lot of disparate groups that are kind of doing their own thing. So the hope was to kind of build those communication between those departments, kind of get everyone collaborating on the same page. So why did the university want to do this? Obviously, mainly for asset management, improved decision making for planning purposes, cost savings, RDM, determining RDM dollar usage and how they do that. So when I was brought on board, mainly I started doing an assessment. So what you see here, I do not meant to actually be able to read all of the tiny text on there. I just try to give you a feel of all the main groups that are using GIS or some form of digital data. It could be CAD data as well. So the circles include different groups like our campus park, which is our parking, student life, med center, public safety. Off of that, it kind of shows the various data sets that they are responsible for maintaining. And then our hope is, we are currently building those connections, is to feed that data into the enterprise GIS so that we can serve that out through web mapping applications, and also provide an enterprise data warehouse, which would be the main repository for that data, so that you don't have to individually contact those groups. You can go straight to them. The text you see in red are the existing web mapping applications or desktop applications that are already using that digital data. So we're working on trying to integrate those as well. And again, you're not meant to read all of this. This just kind of gives you a feel, a sense that enterprise GIS has started here at the university, what we've tried to accomplish. So doing a university-wide assessment, compiling listservs, getting an advisory committee developed, migrating our base map into GIS. It was all in CAD and actually a mixed environment, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Getting our web mapping application developed, developing a system architecture design, actually having that built up, lots of things. And so one of the main things that we've been working on is migrating to one actual base map. We had, like I said, a bunch of disparate data sources coming. They were being maintained both in file geodatabases, CAD Smart Feature, that was our Facilities Operations Development Group, had some of those data layers. They also had some data layers in Oracle Spatial. We migrated all those different environments into SQL SDE, trying to follow as closely as possible the local government information model. We've modified it somewhat, but we're trying to stick with that because we'd really like to be able to use, leverage the usage of ArcGIS Online templates. Mainly right now we're using this in desktop and the web app, which I'll talk about later. So as far as floor plans and segueing a little bit into CAD to GIS, you know, I think most universities are already very familiar with this. All of our CAD drawings were in 0, 0 space. So like many of you, we've also had to georeference those CAD drawings. We then utilized FME to kind of port that data, the space identifiers in there so that we can then link back to the space data system that we use here called SIMS. That's been fairly straightforward. It wasn't too difficult. We had students do the georeferencing. So we didn't have too many complexities with that. And we're still utilizing that for a majority of the campus, so you'll see that here in a minute. So BIM. You know, as you guys are probably familiar, right, BIM stands for Building Information Modeling. It really is the way that buildings and design drawings, as things are being built, are going to be delivered to the university. Obviously, there are huge benefits for design and construction. It's 3D. It allows better visualization for the owner. It allows coordination between those disciplines. So you can have that interference checking to know, is this HVAC system going to run into the plumbing? That kind of stuff that you couldn't tell as easily with those old 2D CAD drawings. And then we can talk a little bit about level of development. So we're in general going to be maintaining stuff around the LOD 2 or 3 level, mainly just the spaces in the rooms, some very limited details such as doors, windows, some plumbing fixtures, mainly like restrooms and that sort of thing. As-built will be delivered more in like the LOD 4, but we don't have the level of staffing to be able to maintain that long term. So we kind of scale down those drawings. We'll keep those as static, but as far as maintenance going forward, those will be more just for the spaces and rooms. So let me get into the Buckeye BIM Initiative. So there's really 2 portions to the Buckeye BIM Initiative. There's the BIM for existing buildings, and then there's the BIM for design and construction. Let me go back a minute. So the BIM for existing buildings, basically what that is we're taking our existing 2D CAD floor plans, and then utilizing student labor, we're building Revit models straight from those 2D CADs. A lot of time that requires students going in the field and getting measurements, especially for ceiling heights and those sorts of information that aren't necessarily in the CAD drawing or that they need to confirm because some of those CAD drawings are kind of old. And then obviously the BIM for design and construction deals with establishing standards for those BIM models that come in, hopefully from Revit, to the university so that we can more easily integrate them to our existing system, right? Because as everyone knows, consultants have all different kinds of ideas of how they want to label doors or certain things. So we try to establish some standards so that our lives are a lot easier trying to integrate what we get from them. So this just kind of gives you a timeline. OSU began considering BIM in like 2008, so actually well before they established Enterprise GIS Initiative. They've made some good progress. They've completed the Wexner Medical Center entirely. All the Wexner Medical Center campus has been complete, and we're about halfway through main campus. Let me show you a couple more pictures of that. So far, we've converted about 15 million square feet of existing buildings of a total of over 34 million. So we're not quite halfway there. Estimates are another potentially 2 to 3 years till we can finish migrating all that, and that is being done all with student labor. It's being QC'd by 2 of the full-time employees, but mainly the actual conversions are being done by the students. And this just gives you an overview of the buildings that are complete. So the ones that are in red are all of the buildings that have been migrated into Revit models. Blue and the pinker are kind of in progress. So the BIM and GIS integration issues, right? Obviously, BIM is much richer in detail than the GIS. A couple other things is GIS really has only recently become fully 3D. I mean, you have ArcScene and City Engine, but it's still fairly new and not nearly as well established as their 2D, right? So how do we handle all of that extra information that are in those Revit models? How do we filter that out? And then basically, how do you get Revit to share that information? Revit's not very friendly as far as sharing a lot of that space information with the GIS. You can't just do a straight export on that. So for us, our option is to kind of look into the ISC. ISC is kind of it's a vendor neutral, software neutral. It can be, can be interrogated by some of those other software applications so that hopefully we can pull out that information that we need. That's mainly what we're using as far as exporting out of Revit. You can see it's kind of then software neutral. So here we're talking more about that detail of BIM and how do we kind of scale down to get the one item we need, say door, into our GIS. So our options were to basically, if we're going to 2D, that's not too complex. We're just going to be using a feature class in a geodatabase. But trying to figure out what 3D format we wanted to go to, we kind of had to compare the potential formats with what our usage was going to be. Ultimately, we just went with a 3D shapefile. That will kind of limit us with not being able to have textures on it, or to do indoor modeling or routing, which we're not too concerned about at this point. It seemed fairly simple to manage in ArcScene and City Engine, which is what we're using. So how do we actually get from the BIM to the GIS? Obviously, you got your Revit model on the top. Our outputs, you'll see that's the 3D shapefile, and then the 2D file geodatabase, or feature class. Ours is an FDE on the right. So we worked with Wolfert pretty extensively to help us develop a model using SAFE's FME software to migrate that data out of that IFC export from Revit. This kind of shows you just a screenshot of the file. It kind of looks complex, but it's not too bad when you kind of run it through. And the great thing is right now, it'll just cascade through the whole folder. So it'll run through all the buildings just at one time. You can run it overnight and have all your spaces updated, in the morning. So just an overview of our data conversion workflow, right? We have Revit. And we shove that into, we export to IFC. We shove that into the FME model, and that comes out to the ArcGIS both into a 2D format so that we can use that at a desktop and the web mapping application, which I'll show you at the end, and also into 3D shapefiles for usage in City Engine and ArcScene on the desktop side as well. So just get down into the nitty-gritty, because I always like to know, like, exactly how do you do that? Okay, great, you know, you shove it in a model, but how is it actually working? So real quickly, I'll talk a few minutes about how we do that. Basically, go into our arc map. We get a coordinate for the point on the building, and also the corresponding elevation from arc map. We enter that into the Revit model, so we're having students enter that northing and southing, easting, westing into the project base point, which is shared with the survey point, add the elevation into it. Then we just export to IFC. We just do the standard IFC export. FME has an IFC export, but we didn't really even need to use that. And then we run it through the FME models, ensuring that we tell it what coordinate system we're in, because Revit doesn't really track a coordinate system. So you just specify here if you're using your state plane coordinate system, and it pops out. So some of the challenges we had were how IFC handled the columns, some of the custom attributes that we had already created in Revit for our BIM models. That was in regards to how our SIMS database, which is our space information management system, like to see it, and then the coordinate system, which I just briefly mentioned. So here you see the Revit file. This is like of Myling Hall. And this is after you run it through the FME. This is what comes out for your 2D geodatabase. If you notice, these are just the spaces. That's all you'll see on the web mapping application. That's mainly, these are then linked to the space information management system. The 3D shape file, this is what we're using in ArcScene and City Engine. And the doors and windows and the stairs as well for the 3D shape file. So we utilized Esri's interior space data model, both for the building floors and then the building interior spaces, trying to stick with the same attribute naming schemes. They mapped fairly well from what we already had coming out of Revit. So here you see just a screenshot of the building floors. This is of the med center and the actual rooms, the building interior space rooms. So are we actually using this? It's great, you know, okay, great, you can get into a feature class and a 3D shape file. We're using that in a web mapping application that will help us build using JavaScript and HTML5. We're calling it GIS Maps. Our GIS Maps application really is just a viewer to provide students, faculty, and staff information that they really previously didn't have access to, or if they did, they had to contact the individual department and wait for responses. This is really just putting the power of that information in the staff and the faculty's hands to hopefully really reduce those data calls that we get a lot of times. So it provides the basic, GIS data, or base mapping information, building information, parking locations, the standard stuff students might want, and faculty might want to see, but also more detailed information that the staff wants to see, like energy usages for building, information about the interior spaces, our building assessment data, utility locations. And then it's nice that it works, both on desktops, tablets, and smartphones. So just a screenshot of what it looks. Obviously, you can load the services in your desktop too. And I'll show a demo of this here shortly. So other things you can get to that, you can display the floors around the campus. So those, and it's a mix too. I don't know if I made that clear because we're only 50% of the way through migrating all of our existing 2D CAD drawings to Revit models. It's a mix. So we're still running both that 2D export from CAD to GIS, but also that 3D export from Revit to GIS. So it's a mix. It all still dumps into the same feature class in our SDE. It doesn't care. Luckily, the linkages are still all the same, so it still hits the same space data information database. It's not a problem with that. So the things you'll be able to connect to in our GIS Maps is you can get to both the space information database and also the building assessments database. So you can find out about organizations for a room, departments, colleges, the room type, capacity, room number, space IDs, and then anything related to the building assessments, which are on a building basis, not by room. So there's just another screenshot, floor plans of linking to the space data in SIMS. So if I click on that room 160, it's going to tell me what its full space ID is, which is composed of our building, and then the floor, and then the space. Who's in there, what's the square footage. Obviously, we charge for our spaces depending on who's owning it. So a lot of departments or orgs want to know, hey, where's all my space? How much square footage do I have? How is it distributed across campus? Those kinds of things you could answer on a building by building basis, but not really previously on a campus-wide basis. Getting that overview of where are my buildings located, where are my spaces located across campus. The other great thing you can do is there's a real need, especially from planning purposes, to be able to categorize and query that space utilization, right? So based on room type, you know, what's the breakdown? What's the breakdown of those rooms for a particular building? So our application does that now, right? If you notice in the little table, I don't know how well you can see that, but it shows you both your, your circulation has like 20,000 square feet for Miling Hall. Your mechanicals, 7% of the building. So it really allows people, planners particularly, to be able to figure out where is that space being utilized. And then again, on a building-wide basis, linking to that building assessment database. So you can check on it by composite or by HVAC or by MEP, life safety, and as you click, it'll change the color encoding across the building. And then ultimately, we want to be able to build like a three-dimensional campus. So right now, what you're seeing is just a screenshot of the buildings we have built from LiDAR data that we had done. So right now, because obviously, if you recall, we're not fully Revit, we're only 50% of the way there, we're going to be utilizing the LiDAR build three-dimensional buildings as filler for the buildings that we don't have completely migrated into Revit and having that 3D shape file. And I'll show you that in a minute too. All right, so let me do a little demo. Hopefully this will work. Let me escape this just for a moment. Everybody's still there? So if you launch our web mapping application, this is what you're going to get. And anyone can get onto this if they're, bored of me talking. You can go to gismaps.osu.edu and log in. Unfortunately, all the fun stuff is behind a login, which I will show you shortly. But for now, what you're going to get right now is just basic information, right? So you can click on the building. You can get directions. You can go to a detailed information page. If you click on parking garages, you can get the capacity of the garage. This is actually coming from our Campus Park affiliate. We decided to sell our parking a couple of years ago. So that's now managed by an outside vendor. But we're showing, we're displaying the usages of those parking structures. Some of the other things you can see outside of a login are our bus routes. You can see the arrival times is actually live. And if I zoom over here, hopefully one of these, there we go, there's a bus. So this is a live bus. If we watch it move, it should jump. Not sure which way it's going right now. You can also click on our parking lots to get information, know where you want to park. People really like this. A lot of times they don't know where they can park. So it color codes all of our lots. You can also see Car2Go is popular around here. So you can see where the Car2Go cars are. That's a pretty big request as well we've had. I don't know if those buses are moving or not. Should be. Turn off some of that. And then there's lots of stuff. So we got a lot of student amenities, where our construction is. We're doing a huge construction work up here. So this is our North Residential District, which is vastly under construction right now. I'm going to close some of this stuff. But of more interest, and of course you can make the base map transparent. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do in here. But some of the best stuff here is actually behind the login. So if you'll notice now, I just logged in, and now I get all of my utility infrastructure here if I want. This has been a huge thing, you know, with as much construction as the university has. People are constantly hitting utility lines, unfortunately, even though they're marked. And the great thing is that, you know, because this is available on the mobile device now, really you can just take this out in the field. You got your phone, you can just double check, you know, before you dig in a particular area, or a lot of the planners are now using it as well. If they know they want to, put in like a new bus central transport station or whatever, a transportation hub, they can kind of check first without having to go and really bug the utility guys first to see, you know, are there storm lines or maybe sanitary lines in a particular area they're interested in doing construction or putting a new site in. Another nice thing where we've been able to do is our road conditions. So those are required out there, and you can just click on them, and it's going to tell you the last time it was assessed. This should really help with our deferred maintenance and determining what roads we really need to work on as far as maintaining, because these are all our roads. All right, but to get back to how are we using those Revit models, well, here you go. So these are all the floor plans we have for particular buildings. This is a mix, so you're not going to be able to tell, like, did this come from the 2D CAD or did this come from the Revit model? You can't tell from here, which is kind of how we want it. We don't want people to know, like, oh, that we're not quite done with that. So you can click on these buildings, these rooms. Let me zoom in a little more. So they auto-label by room number. And this gives you the space ID for that particular room. It's a classroom, what the square footage is of it, the organization, what its function, its capacity. Our hope is that ultimately, you know, as people are able to access the data a lot more easily, they're going to be more interested in ensuring that the data is up to date. Because a lot of times people don't utilize the data. They don't really know, you know, its usage. And then sometimes they're not as willing to share when things change. But hopefully now that they can see it here for all the world to see, they're going to be more invested in wanting to make sure that their information is correct. So another way you can access this is through our space data. And this is what allows all that crazy color coding that the planners really use. So it's going to open up for me. And it doesn't want to. Back to layers. Oh, I'm trying to freak it out. There we go. So you can color code by department or by college, and you can also drill down to the floor level. All right, so this is a breakdown by colleges. But hey, maybe you want to see the breakdown by org for that particular building. So depending on the breakdown you want to see, you can just toggle between each of those, right? So it's going to toggle. It's going to give you the square footage either by org or department or room type, just depending on whatever you last clicked on as far as your use category, and it'll give you both square footages and percentages. You can also look for a specific one, like what's got classroom pool in it, which is pretty much everything. can just go back to predominant. You can also click on here and show interior. So at this level, because it's doing such heavy querying of the space information management system, you can only view by like one building at a time because it's going to color code each thing. And you'll also still find the same information, right? So Business Services Center, this is the post office. There's lots of information you get here. And then our building assessments, which I talked about before. So my composite. And then depending, you can also drill down in there, right? Okay, let's see, MEP, HVAC, or architectural and exteriors. The other nice thing out of here is you used to have to contact the individual assessor to get these assessment reports. It does take a minute or two to load, so I'll let it churn there. Hopefully it actually loads. But now they can just get that themselves. They can also download all the building conditions for the whole university, and it just dumps it out into a spreadsheet, so you can click that. Let's see if this is done. There you go. So this is the actual report that previously had to be requested individually, which you can now just get straight out of here. There's 6 pages, so there's a lot of stuff in here. That's for on each building. All right, and one more thing. So that's how we are utilizing our floor plans 2-dimensionally. 3-dimensionally, we're utilizing them in CityEngine. Right now, it's just kind of a sample. We haven't loaded the entire campus in here, but that's our intent this summer. Our web application took a little longer to roll out, working with our IT than we had hoped. But this will just show you, these are just the 3D shape files straight loaded into CityEngine. You can do some canvassing of the building. We can zoom in. You can also get the same information. Right now, this one isn't linked to the SIMS database, but that space information would pop up here on the left as well. Some other nice things, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with CityEngine, but there's shadowing, which is really cool for our planners, right? So being able to potentially tell, how is this new building that we, are hoping to put in, how is it going to be affected? How is it going to affect other buildings, right? Our campus can be sort of dense, especially in the main area. So how is a new building potentially going to affect it? How is signage potentially going to affect buildings and shadowing? Being able to do that is, pretty cool. The other thing that we're hoping to do is we have pretty extensive tree data. I didn't really show that on our maps side, but I can. So these trees, they're not just decorative. They're actually, you can click on them and get information about them, right? So this is the American sweet gum, and it's 21-inch diameter. We have decent LiDAR data for the university. So we're really hoping to extrapolate from the LiDAR points and create heights off those trees to really make our CityEngine view be very lifelike, as having the actual trees at the appropriate heights, even with the appropriate types, would really help people feel like they're in the university, so to speak. I think that is it. So I don't know if you're getting any questions. Hello?
Okay, hello. Well, thank you. Thank you. You guys have a pretty awesome interactive web map. I think I'm drooling over here. That's great. And I love our base map, but that's excellent. It's cool to see how many things you guys have done with the maps. I'm curious, are you guys able to track usage on your website to see how many people are using it and for what purposes?
We'd love to do that. So literally, our web app, the one that I just showed you, I'm not sure if I'm still sharing my screen or not, this hasn't even really rolled out to the whole university community. There's still been some internal discussion. The university previously was using a Google a Google mapping application. And so there's some discussion among communications on how do we integrate those, how do we kind of phase that out. We won't want to send, mixed, which web map do I go to? So really, this has really only been rolled out internally to our administration and planning group, and really not to anyone else. Even though it's open publicly, we're doing a very soft rollout. So you're seeing just, this is the baby step. This is our GIS Maps 1.0. So usage-wise, I've been bugging IT about it, and they're going to get us on Splunk apparently, but I have yet to see any, canned queries that I can utilize to see what our usage is. I know just from verbal feedback, we're getting a lot of very good verbal feedback, but yeah, hopefully in the next month or so, I'll have actual numbers.
Yeah, I bet you are getting good feedback verbally, but how cool would it be? You clearly want to see that information. That'd be great. Stephen Jin had a question about how you make that information available to end users, and you kind of touched on that. Like, there's some information that's available to the public, and then other information you have to access via a login. Is that for your department or employees or students, or who can log in and see this information?
Right. So, the generic one, if you're not logged in, anyone can get to, right? You guys can get to that. The login, the university itself uses something called the shibboleth authentication, and we are just tied right onto that. So when we hit our login, it checks with shibboleth to say, are you at osu.edu? Do you basically have an email at OSU? And then also there's a second check on our database side. So any user that wants access, it's not just any student or staff. We actually have a leveled users. I didn't touch on it here, but I'll talk about it now. We'd like a lot of our utilities guys want to be able to edit at least some of the unique attributes in the field. And the guys that are maintaining the data would love that because it's hard for them to keep up. So behind the scenes, if you have a name.number, then it checks with our database and says, are you a viewer? And then what level of viewer are you? Can you see space data, building data, and utilities data? It's phased, right? So you could see all three of those. You could only see building assessments. You could see just space data. Or you could also be an editor for utilities. It's not too complex. Wolfert helped us set that portion up as far as the database user portion. And so far it's been fairly easy to manage. And obviously if they leave the university, then they just won't be able to log in anymore. So.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. With the utilities information and allowing that to be edited within the web, do you have anything in place to QC the information before it's published, or does it go live?
Yep. Nope, it doesn't go live right away. It goes to a separate database, really, that then is checked by the utilities guys.
Gotcha. Taylor Keene doesn't have a question, but he had a comment. He said that they use Google Analytics, which is free, to track usage and site traffic for their public campus map at UMD. So maybe that'll be something useful.
That would be awesome. Yeah, and our IT guys mentioned that as well. But
okay, great. Graham Smith has a question about building condition data. How do you maintain that? Is it updated directly to the database, or do you have an outside vendor that delivers the data in a way that can be uploaded, or is it a hodgepodge of those things, of different BIM deliverables from contracts and whatnot?
No, so our building assessments, and actually, Rook, you might be able to comment on this. There's another staff member here. We had 2 assessors. Now we have 1 right now, but I think the second one's going to be rehired. We have 2 building assessors that go out on a cyclical basis. I think it's 3 years. Every 3 years, they go out and actually field verify all of those assessment categories and types for each building. So they take new photos. I mean, they're very, feet on the ground, and then they enter all that information in. I think I still have that up. I don't know if I'm still sharing my screen. All this text information and that coding, they enter all of that information into the database, and then our GIS just touches it. It says, look for building number 69, okay, and then it pulls that straight from the database.
Okay. Okay, that's neat. That's very neat. That's very neat. Graham also says awesome map app.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Karen Williamson has a question about utilities, and she says, nice job on the presentation and the work you've been doing as well. Now, with the utilities information, do you provide attributes with the utilities information as well, in addition to the topology?
Yeah, so very limited right now. I personally am not responsible for the utilities. I'm actively working with the utilities group. They're actually in the midst of converting from a mixed environment. They were in CAD, Smart Feature, and Oracle Spatial. They're just now in the process of migrating all of that into SDE, or GIS SDE. So yeah, if you click on this, like I'll click on one of these, hopefully it pops up. So it's very like cryptic. They haven't done much cleanup. We kind of asked, like, can you please just give us the data? So apparently this is a tunnel, it's main, and then there's size diameters. I'm assuming these are inch diameters. So there is limited data. It's just whatever utilities group happens to have available for that stuff. And then there's different stuff to, for storm lines and stuff. We can click on that as well. The other great thing is, I haven't been able to show it, but when you identify on something on here, it can potentially identify like multiple features. So it can be a little cumbersome to drive at this point. Well, right now it's performing great, but sometimes if there's multiple features on a particular thing, like a building next to a tree, it'll identify all of those things. So you might have to select from the drop down which thing you would like to actually view the information for.
What of your information on the web map is cached versus dynamic?
It's mixed. Some of the actual database information is static, like a nightly static pull, just because the processing time was taking too long. But it's just mixed. Depends on what you're talking about.
Okay.
Aerials are cached. Obviously, some of the base map data is not.
Okay. Okay. Kevin Stipp has a question. In what way can a contractor deliver a model that will help you streamline the data into GIS from Revit? Is less data sometimes better? Do you guys have standards that you provide to contractors when they're delivering data? I imagine you do.
Yeah, so interestingly though, just this year. So previously we were kind of like, can you send us Revit? That'd be great. And then you get this giant Revit model with so much stuff in it. It takes students forever to figure out what layer it needs to go to and then figure out if they actually need it. So yeah, just this year they worked really hard, I think with was it Astorino and Messer, to develop those specific Revit standards. And actually they're not Revit. They don't specify, they just specify things that we need. We don't care how they get there. They just need to be in specific standards. If you wanted more information on that, you could talk to Joe. He's got, I'm sure they could share that document with anyone that's interested. It's very long and in-depth, and they basically hand it to the contractors and like, this is what we need. So yeah.
Okay. You mentioned several times during the presentation the student employment that you have in your office being pretty integral to processing data. What kind of expertise do the students that you have on staff carry with them?
So it's a mix. A lot of the BIM students, I'd say, are all mainly architecture, and they actually we have a really good training program. They actually hire a consultant to come in for at the very beginning of the summer, the students are required to come in for a week-long intensive training on Revit, and we basically train them everything they need to know. We also have very documented processes on how you do things, and then there's pretty tight oversight too with the full-time employees of the student work, and then we try to keep them as long as possible, obviously. As far as the GIS, most of them are geography students. I have some civil engineering students. Again, mostly on-the-job training. Obviously, we try to pick students that have done some GIS already, but having really well-documented processes is critical. And then just having follow-up meetings. Is everything going okay? Yeah, what problems are you having? Just keeping those lines of communication open. And yeah, it requires a little more oversight, but we're just realistically, we're just not going to get more full-time employees. So we have to make do with what we've got, and it's been working.
Yeah. I think that's such a great experience for them, too, like to be able to work with an innovative department such as this and then have all of that training on top of it. Like, people would pay decent money to go to a week-long intensive Revit training. That's
right.
That's
and yeah, our architecture students are like getting snapped up like hotcakes, literally, as soon as they get out of here. And that has really helped, too, for us to be able to be a lot more particular with who we hire, because architecture department is really, word gets around, right? The students are getting hired like straight out of school with really decent, because who has Revit training straight out of college? Not very many necessarily. So that's really helped us get better students in, too.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. The symbiosis, mutually beneficial there.
Yes.
Brad Hollis had a question about guidelines as well that I think we pretty much addressed already. I just didn't see his in the queue. He had already sent it. But I do have a question that is wrapped up in his, and that is, do the standards change, or do you find them changing? You mentioned having things very well documented and providing information to contractors to provide deliverables in a format you need. But as you move forward with more and more projects, do you find that the standards are changing quite a bit, or are they pretty consistent?
They haven't had too many even delivered in that format yet, so I don't know. I can't really speak to that yet. Like I said, they just implemented those standards this year, and I'm not even sure how many models they've gotten yet since then. I know because, so the North Residential District is huge. They're putting in like, how many buildings? Do you know how many buildings they're putting in? They're putting in quite a few new buildings. So the one benefit is that we know Messer, who is actually like the contractor there, they helped us design these standards. So we're not really concerned, at least when we get North Residential District, because they helped us design those standards. So I think that was one of the benefits on those BIM standards, that they actually worked not with just a consultant to develop these standards, but actually with somewhat, a construction company in the field that's actually doing this kind of stuff, so that they could, make things more reasonable, right?
Yep, definitely, definitely. Okay, well, that's all of the questions I have on this end for now. Do you or your folks have any questions over there?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you to all of our attendees joining us today. You can access the recording and slides from the CFTA website following this webinar, and I've seen a lot of incoming comments hoping that that would be the case. If you weren't able to ask a question or have it answered today, or you have any questions after this closes, please feel free to contact Larissa directly. The next and final webinar in the Geotech Showcase is scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern Time on June 30th. Nils LaCour, Senior Physical Planner from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, will present Integrating GIS and IWMS to create an effective space planning tool. For more information on future webinars in this series and more, visit the CFTA website at www.cfta.org.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.